Oh, yeah.
Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to What's On.
Hey!
Way.
Darn it. There's my Joe Colton curse.
Yeah, almost.
Well,
You're a little PG-13 for that crowd, Mark.
I got no gimmick infringement here. I got the point. She's got the mouth.
Fair enough. I'm your host, Mike Irizarry. With me, of course, up here in the top row, former head of marketing for the G.I. Joe brand at Hasbro. Hey, we're going with it. You never correct me, so I'm gonna keep saying that was your title.
It's fine. I
Sure,
dig it.
remember.
Hey! It's good to be here in the brightness of the day, right? Really makes my pasty skin come out. So I love it.
Gives you a healthy glow.
I'll be sunburned by the end of the show, but that's cool.
You're behind a window, but that will not affect anything.
Yeah, no direct sunlight. Like you can shine over there on the wall. It's cool.
Like Sheamus on WWE.
Pretty much. I'm made of Philadelphia cream cheese.
Exactly.
That's me.
And speaking of Sheamus and folks from the Emerald Isle, joining us today in the bottom row, you may, if you're a longtime fan of the show, you'll remember when we had them on as the authors of Total Retaliation, which is how many years ago, guys?
Oh,
7.
Is it 7 years? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 7 years.
Doesn't feel like 7 years.
Left to right, Brian Hickey and Paddy Lennon are with us as well. Gentlemen, big hand.
That's right.
So it's been a while. I haven't physically seen you guys since the last rollout roll call I made to, and I think that was 5 years ago.
Was that London?
No, I didn't get to that one.
So yeah, that'd be 6 years this year.
Yeah, Southampton, and I think it was 6 years. God, that was a great rollout roll call, and I can't believe I haven't seen you face to face since then. It doesn't seem like 6 years.
No,
it doesn't seem like 6 years when you took all my money for that G.I. Joe 50th product you brought over in your suitcase.
That's right. That was the plan, though. Hey, man, I was a popular guy that weekend. I have a giant, for the folks at home, I have this giant, hideous turquoise blue and turquoise green, like a huge duffel bag with wheels, and I filled it up with 50th anniversary stuff, and it was empty by the end of it all. I was, when you're at Heathrow, you have to change your money. And I had changed over what cash I had from American dollars to pounds. And then when I came back, I had so many more pounds than I had come in with that they were looking at me a little bit funny. So I had to make up some stories.
Because selling 50th anniversary G.I. Joe product would be just too embarrassing.
Well, it's too embarrassing, but who's going to believe that, right?
Well, I was stopped at by the TSA in Las Vegas one of the years I was in the States because I had an entire rucksack full of Transformers alternators.
Those are nice. I was a big fan of that line. I collected that line like crazy.
I literally ended up going. It was 2006 for SDCC when I was over, and I was just like, well, they're not available here, so I'm just going to buy every one of them I see. So I ended up buying like maybe 15 of them, of the different figures, just in various comic shops and toy shops, anywhere I stopped. And I'm coming through Las Vegas airport and literally duffel bag full of alternators in their packages still, because I'm not a monster. And the girl in the conveyor belt just gives me the dirtiest look, and she's like, "There's a special line for you." And pointed me over to this giant machine that was like a hairdryer that shot pressurized air at you, because apparently carrying tons of Transformers to an airport is suspicious.
I think that counts as produce is the problem.
Is that the same trip, Paddy, where when you were coming into America, they asked you what was your purpose for visiting, and you had that dilemma of, do I be really honest about and say I'm going to a toy convention, or do I make up a lie? And you have to tell the truth. And to verify your you tell the story way better than I do.
Yeah, so it was actually when I went to New Jersey Collectors Con about 3 years ago. So they're like asking purpose of your visit, and I'm like, I'm meeting some friends, and the guy is like, where did you meet these friends? Like as if it was like an Al Qaeda meeting or something I had been attending. And I'm like, no, I'm a toy collector. I'm attending a toy convention with some friends of mine. And the guy's like, what sort of toys do you collect? And then I had to go into this whole explanation of Diaclone. And eventually I started talking about Diaclone and eHobby and exclusives and Takara for long enough that the guy's like, yeah, okay, I believe you. Go.
But the glaze came over.
I was also nearly arrested at the Empire State Building for having Transformers in my backpack.
Jesus, dude.
Was it a G1 Megatron, right?
No, it wasn't.
A G1 Megatron.
So for my honeymoon, myself and my wife went to New York, and obviously, first thing you do when you arrive in New York is you go to the Toys R Us in Times Square. Like if you're us, and sure enough, I found a whole bunch of Transformers Generations there that obviously weren't available here. So loaded up the knapsack with, I think it was like Wheeljack and Tracks, and it was when they were, Wheeljack and Tracks and a bludgeon from Revenge of the Fallen, showing how old I am, how long it's been since I was married. The really cool bludgeon they did that had like kind of looked like the Pretender, but also transformed into the tank.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought them, took them out of their package because I only had a little backpack with me because I wasn't expecting to find anything. And so we went into the Empire State Building and put everything through the bags and stuff. And the woman running the X-ray machine starts screaming, "There's a gun in this backpack!" And I absolutely bricked it. And I'm screaming at security guards as they're running towards me, going, "There's no gun! And sure enough, she had seen Wheeljack's gun on the X-ray machine, and it just said gun to her, and so she called the cops.
I mean,
but of course, the gun is like this size,
right?
Jesus,
scale is a little off on that one.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, if you're being really honest, you should have yelled, "It's a tiny gun! It's a little tiny gun!" Because there was a gun in that bag.
Yeah, but like, also, I don't think any Irish man should be around the Empire State Building shouting "gun, gun, gun" at all. Like the same way you shouldn't say "bomb" in an airplane.
Yeah, I figure they're probably still a little. I guess I don't want to use the term here, but trigger happy regarding that in old New York at this point. So you just put your hands in the air and get on your knees in advance and just save them the trouble. Anyway,
so if your listeners want to take any advice from this, it's don't go to the Empire State Building immediately after going to Toys R Us.
Not a problem anymore.
Not a problem anymore because Toys R Us is gone, but you know what I mean.
We took care of that.
Right.
Thanks, Bain Capital.
For real.
I never got caught with anything like that, but my son came back from like an overnight Christian camp. He goes to a Christian school, and he decided to take one of my Transformers without asking, an old one. And when I emptied his bag, it was broken into 1 billion pieces in the bottom. Right. And I would have been angrier at, the destruction because it was one of the more valuable guys, except it was Megatron. He took the original Megatron to Christian camp. Right. It looks like a legit Luger. And so the fact that it got smashed to bits at the bottom under all those Capri Suns and stuff, totally fine with that because at least it didn't look like a weapon anymore. Make sure it's a good, hey, for all you kids out there, if your parents send you away to a Christian overnight camp, make sure you're packing, right? Make sure you're strapping because you never know what might happen out there.
Make sure you're strapping the one Transformer that's never going to get reissued in the North American market.
The one you should not grab as a kid. And he was like, "I'm taking that, baby. I'm not going to ask because he'll probably say no."
We start them young, don't we?
Yeah. He had to buy me. I didn't want to replace the old one. I made him buy me a Masterpiece Megatron. He had to work that off, baby. That's how it works.
Wow.
Crack that whip, Mark.
That's it. Don't take Daddy's firearms.
Such as they are.
Yeah, such as they are.
You've told us that story on the show before, and I keep wondering, like, what situation is he looking to pull that out in?
Got me. He wasn't. I don't think he even thought that far. I think he just said, "I'm going to bring one that I don't use or don't have access to, and I'll be able to, transform it back and forth over and over again on the bus ride up, and it'll be a time killer." I don't think it ever occurred to him that he was taking the. I mean, he could have taken any other Megatron, right? If he wanted a Megatron, really, he could have taken any other Transformer, and it would not have potentially been an issue. But no, he took the one that legit looks like a real pistol. So,
and he's the crummiest one too.
Yeah, he's a terrible robot.
Yeah,
right. Like, but
awful toy.
Yeah,
I'd have been more into Transformers as a kid if Megatron had looked a little better.
Yeah, he's a bad looking bot. That's true. Great looking pistol.
Yeah, bad trigger placement.
Bad. He's always happy to see you, baby.
Yeah, that he is. That he is. But anyways, we're here this afternoon, obviously, because we don't want to make Brian and Paddy stay awake until 3 a.m. to talk to us about their book. So we're going a little early. We will not be here this evening. There is no second show. It is not the same as the first show. So this is it today. So we apologize if you're normally here with us at 9 p.m. We got a few. We're not quite up to last time. Last time we did a daytime episode, we were pulling in like high teens.
Yeah.
And that was a little disturbing because I was afraid that like all of our fans are out of work. But no, this time it's
like some of the hosts.
Right. Unemployed and underemployed.
Right. I'm your guy.
Right.
Mike and I got you covered.
Yeah, we got that one beat down. So and anyways, to make sure that Paddy and Brian didn't have to stay up until 4 a.m. to chat with us, we're going in the afternoon. And so everybody gets the night off after this.
I guarantee
except because it is the night here.
It is our
but what's going to happen at 8:58 tonight, right? You're going to get a text from Joe going, "Where's the link? I'm all set."
Probably. She pays
attention that way. When she realizes her error at 9 o'clock, right on cue, she's going to curse.
No, she is. She's on assignment this week. Remember, she's traveling to do some that Orville movie that she's a part of.
That's right.
So she wasn't going to be a part of this anyway. This week, like next week, is going to be the first time we have a chance to get her to curse again.
Well, she'll be well rested.
She is for the purposes of the show on assignment.
Fair enough.
That's where we're going.
She's hunting down Major Blood.
Sure.
Who is apparently in Ireland.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Tripping over him we are.
I mean, it's fair enough. How many years has it been since the UK got exclusives that we didn't have here?
I know it's really funny because the classified stuff has been so much easier to get here than it is in the States. I've been sending Cobra Troopers over to people in the States for the last 6 months.
I haven't heard from you over that time, Paddy. What's up with that?
That's true.
Well,
I'm sorry. I'm too busy sending all of Boss Fight and Adam Rich's wrestling figures that apparently are equally difficult to get in the States. And like literally, I have a toy shop 10 minutes walk, maybe 10 minutes walk.
True.
A massive Smith's, and it's like it has everything. And I'm just like, do you need it? I'll ship it over to you this week. And literally walk over, pick all this really expensive stuff that like there was this AEW ring Eric Aranya wanted, and it was like $200 in the States, and there were like 5 of them stacked up beside me for $35 each. And I'm like, how many do you want?
See, now that
yeah,
just talk about that because they put that on Facebook sometimes. That always surprises me too, because the one thing that I can find at any given time here seems to be AEW figures.
Mm-hmm.
Even like this morning, I stopped in at one of the Targets on my way to work just to see if, God forbid, Major Blood was out. They don't even have, for the record, they don't even have the G.I. Joe pegs cleared off for G.I. Joe figures. They're covered in Ghostbusters. Every time, like I'll actually be the guy who moves the Ghostbusters figures off just so that they see there's an empty peg that's supposed to be, and every time I go back, the Ghostbusters are back on the G.I. Joe peg.
You can find AEW figures. They're right between the Ghostbusters section and the wrestling figures section.
Right.
Good idea.
Right. It's that's pretty close to true though. Because next to the AEW guys was like a whole peg of Big Van Vader. And you don't get to be, you don't have a better wrestler than that, man. That's a fantastic figure right there. Anyways, so since we're doing this is technically going back way back several tangents ago. We're not doing a regular episode. We're going to do a news segment.
Yay!
Because there is news.
So you guys get to do news with us.
It's been a lean 5 years, but there's news again.
Right.
Right. It was there's a reason we were only doing one show every couple of months.
Is this why the movie got so delayed? Because we didn't have Brian and Paddy on? We should have had these guys on years ago.
They're in demand, man. You can't just.
I'm just saying, we agreed to come on the podcast, and the trailer drops.
Yep.
A lot of power. A lot of power out there.
It was pretty well boom, boom, one after the other. But that is our first piece of news. It is the movie roundup, and as we reported last week, the 60-second teaser trailer for Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins was released, and just for the sake of not wanting to pay somebody else any revenue that this video might make, which it won't, but still, 60 seconds of G.I. Joe Origins is out there. Mark Weber, we'll start with you. What'd you think?
I mean, I thought the trailer itself, I thought looked really good. It's very slick. It's very Matrix meets John Wick. It didn't, other than the small snippets of a look at Scarlet and a look at Baroness and the one look at the Snake Eyes mask, it doesn't look like G.I. Joe very much, but it doesn't have to, since it's a prequel. So I thought it looked slick. I bet your average moviegoer will say, hey, that looks pretty cool. Maybe I'll give it a shot. And if for it to be a big hit, it's going to have to hit your average moviegoer. So I got to assume it's mission accomplished for Paramount and Hasbro. The one bit that I guess two bits that I tripped over, I think it's Storm Shadow's line in the voiceover where he says, for 600 years, our ninja have brought peace to the world. And I'm like, never really thought of ninjas as a peacekeeping force. But
they're normally the ones that the samurai were the peacekeeping force, and they were the
the ninjas were the dirty B words.
The ninjas went legit. Who knew? But maybe they'll explain that better. Maybe he's saying, by balancing conflict or whatever. So, but that one line kind of was a record scratch for me. And then the one thing that I'm still really nervous about, because I've been on the record, a lot of people have, that the race change for the Snake Eyes character is really not important as long as he retains that outsider status, which is so key to his story and the wedge that is driven between him and Storm Shadow. The fear, I think, with a lot of fans is that they're going to go away from the classic backstory really far, and this Akiko character just seems potentially to be the actual wedge they're going to use between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and the outsider status, which was it's just such a smart way that Larry wrote it, might get pushed off. And leading off of that, the idea that we saw the Snake Eyes mask, but it was just the mask and a hand near it, and then they quick cut to a shot of the actor, but there's no telling if that's the same scene or if that's just put together. And on the poster itself, it's Henry Golding looking over his shoulder at you, like the classic female comic book cover, looking back at you, but holding the mask. And so I think my worry, and the worry of a lot of fans, are if he isn't going to get scarred and going to get muted at some point, then what's the point? He's not Snake Eyes anymore without those things. And I'm not against basic change, and it doesn't have to stick exactly to Larry's original backstory. But if you're going to change some of the basic tenets of characters and brand, then it needs to be to update them or to improve on them. And my real worry is that Snake Eyes is not going to lose his voice, is not going to get scarred, and that mask is just there because it looks cool, and that would really be damaging to the most important character in modern G.I. Joe history. So, I'm hopeful. I'm not optimistic, and the things I'm most worried about are still in play. But overall, I thought it was really good, and I bet it really hit a lot of moviegoers as that's cool. I'll check it out, and that's what the brand needs.
Before we go forward, I'm going to give a piece of advice that one of our fans just threw out there. I don't want to lose the quote, but guys, add some Cobra Troopers to one of the higher Kickstarter donation levels, and you'll hit your goal in no time. There you are, Paddy. There's your 10-minute walk going for you.
Bloods for all.
That's how you get that U.S. money right there.
I like that.
Brian,
what I might do is I'll throw something out there that I will pick up a couple of major bloods, and anybody who backs the book, I'll do a raffle when we fund.
All right.
And enter into a raffle for some major bloods.
Like that.
So let's see what people's reaction is to that, and see if it's worth doing.
Brian, we have listened to Paddy's story time. You've done the least amount of talking. Let's go to you next. What were your thoughts on the 60-second Snake Eyes trailer?
Well, I really enjoyed it. Look, I'm going to just say it. I'm a big fan of, not a big fan, but I do really enjoy Rise of Cobra and Retaliation, and so I'm really excited for the Snake Eyes movie. And of course, I know it's not a continuity of those other movies. It's a reboot, so to speak. And I hear what Mark is saying, in terms of his concerns. Totally hear that, but maybe from a casual moviegoer's perspective, they won't be as invested in the backstory of Snake Eyes. So it probably won't matter to them if he, doesn't lose his voice or get, badly scarred or disfigured or anything like that. And, that presents a lot of opportunity in terms of how they can, maybe reinvent the brand a little bit, maybe by tapping into a different market, but still trying to retain some of the, of the existing fan base that's there. It's a challenge for sure. So, and we won't really know how it gets resolved, if it even does get resolved, until the movie comes out. But, my sort of background as a kid, I'm an Action Force fan. I grew up with, the comic Battle Action Force. That's what I kind of read and soaked in all that material when it was coming out in the early 80s. And Snake Eyes in the Action Force universe of that period is not the same Snake Eyes that's, in the G.I. Joe history. Like, he gets very little comic book time. He has one story in an annual called Snake Eyes, not related to the IDW 10-issue run that came out there last year. And he's more of a ramp.
He was never actually released as Snake Eyes in the vintage toy line here. We didn't get him until later on. He was never released as part of the Palatoy Action Force series. We got that figure repainted as Stalker, but we never actually got Snake Eyes. It's strange. He got a story in the annual, in 1985 annual, but he never got the toy. The toy never made it out here.
And he gets a walk-on cameo in one of the weekly comic stories. Again, where he does. It's more like he just drops in by parachute, takes out a few Cobra sentries, and just kind of clears the way for the main G.I. Joe force to go in and attack a Cobra base. But his skills are, he's not a ninja. He doesn't wield a sword. He's got the Uzi, but he doesn't speak, but he has a lot of thought bubbles. So we hear we get to read what he's thinking all the time. So Snake Eyes wasn't really a big deal. Like, Duke was a big deal. Stalker and Scarlet, they were kind of, gung ho, Roadblock. They were the main kind of, if you like, what I would call Hasbro characters in the Action Force universe, like in 1985. Before them, it was Z Force, it was SAS Force. They were the big heroes, and a lot of the big stories revolved around them. And of course, the Red Shadows before Baron Ironblood reinvented himself as Cobra Commander. So it's a very different universe for us. So, now I'm not speaking for all kind of UK G.I. Joe fans, but I don't have that attachment to, say, the Larry Hama backstory for Snake Eyes or his origin stories for Snake Eyes. So maybe it makes it easier for me to go into this movie with an acceptance of this new character and how this new character might play out as the movie unfolds. But putting all that to one side, I thought the movie or the trailer looked pretty slick. It's a really well put together trailer. Though when I do see these kind of car chase scenes, I tend to yawn. I'm not impressed by big stunts or big special effects. What I'm really looking for at the end of the day is a good story and characters that I can care about. And if that's delivered, then everything else really is just icing on the cake at that stage. So I'd be hopeful that there is actually a really good, unique, original story here that when I go to see the movie, that I'm actually going to really care about this character and all the supporting characters in the story. And maybe there'll be a surprise or two, a little twist at the end that I won't be expecting. That'd be pretty cool.
Z-Force. They just show up at the end.
Escapes in a robo skull at the end of the trailer. They should have put a robo skull in the trailer. Then I'd be really impressed. Right?
I think we'd all be freaking out at that point. Paddy, Lennon, are you on a new level?
I am on a new level, but I'm also Brian's talking about plot development and character, and I'm like, no, I want to see car chases and fights. And to be fair, the trailer did give us that. I guess as I am an unashamed Snake Eyes fan. I've loved that character since I was a kid. Since I saw him in the Marvel UK comics over here, I've always loved that character. So, but I also realized that that character has to change and move on as well if it's to get a new fan base. Every other character with any sort of kind of vintage has been changed and had multiple takes on a number of times. Like if you take Batman, like the Christian Bale Batman is not the Adam West Batman and it's not the Michael Keaton Batman. So, you can still have that character and have very, very different takes on them, to a lot of kids, Spider-Man is Miles Morales now. And so, there's nothing saying Snake Eyes to kids can't be Henry Golding, that way. If Henry does a good role, which I think he will. I think he's excited to do the movie, and I think he has he really wants this movie to do well. I think you can tell that from interviews and so on he's been doing. So I'm not too worried about that. Like the race change and stuff is not something I really care about. As long as it looks cool and he looks like Snake Eyes and he moves like Snake Eyes and he fights like Snake Eyes, I don't really care about that. There's a couple of good things. I think the stunts and stuff in the trailer look great. And I think that aspect of it is going to look really, really good. The fight scenes and so on. So that's what I want. I want like trashy martial arts action. I'll be there on day one.
Looking for Fast and Furious 17.
Well, the stunt team who are doing the fights are a very well regarded stunt team out of Japan for those kind of samurai-ish movies. So the sword fights are going to be pretty good. And really, isn't that what you want out of a G.I. Joe Ninja movie?
Yeah, if we're doing Snake Eyes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I maintain that what we're doing here, we spent the whole first part of the show talking about Paddy's smuggling Transformers. But I'm gonna borrow that term again. We are building the G.I. Joe aligned continuity. You're taking bits and pieces of the stuff that came before, and you're turning it into something that is universal that we can go forward with. And look, I love the story from the '80s comics as much as anybody else does. That's why I'm here doing this show now. I can't lie about that. But at the same time, it's been done and it's perfect and it always will be. And we don't have to worry about getting it again. Like it's always going to be there. So I think the people who are freaking out about the story being changed, it's a movie. And the story you fell in love with wasn't a movie in the first place. So there would just always be a problem with it. So let's just treat this like it's something new and go forward with it and treat it like the launching point that we have to have for this brand that we love to survive and hopefully thrive. I mean, they've made a bunch of really crappy Transformers movies and it's blown them into a whole other stratosphere. If this movie is even halfway good, you'd think
There'd be no Combiner Wars without that 2007 Transformers movie.
It was terrible.
You wouldn't be getting all these G1 excellent G1 based toy lines now up for the last 5, 6, 7 years, unless the Michael Bay movies had happened.
Exactly.
And ironically, there wouldn't have been any Combiner Wars without this
himself.
guy right here. That's what I'm
specifically
talking
mentioned
about.
Combiner Wars. But you know, suddenly the money tap turned on, and you were able to do that sort of stuff. That they hadn't done Combiner.
Just say Combiner Wars, and you got me. I'm in.
Yeah.
Yep. Salute.
Big money Mark Webber is what that turned into.
Pretty proud of that.
So excellent. So we're all looking forward to this one.
Oh yeah.
We're all on a new level.
We are all on a new level. That brings us to our second news item. Related, in-package images of Snake Eyes movie product was revealed. And wholesaler NDA Toys published images of the upcoming Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins movie figures. A quick search through their G.I. Joe listings shows all of the figures that were revealed in April, complete with their red and black motif packaging. And let me go ahead and I'll get this pulled up here. That's it. They're beautiful, aren't they?
Wow.
They're amazing.
Snow Job and Iceberg and Frostbite and Storm Shadow and.
But no, here's Snake Eyes. I took a sampling of them. Obviously, we don't need to go through all of them again. Just go back and watch that episode back in April if you really got to see what's coming out. And there's Storm Shadow, and there's Baroness, and there's Scarlet, and that's the Snake Eyes packaging there. Where you got the Snake Eyes art down in the bottom left, and very, very pronounced Arashikage symbol down there, and the Snake Eyes movie logo up top. It'll be great. For these are the $9.99 figures. That's the major focus of the movie toys. So didn't want to go too far into that, but there it is. So that looks great, and hope to see them on the shelves soon. I won't be buying a whole bunch of these, but I'm excited just to have G.I. Joe all over the toy aisles again.
Well, it's a lot of value too for a $10 toy. So yeah, I'm totally down with this. I hope kids buy these, by the truckload, literally. I hope they don't get all get sent to Ireland. None here, but
I hope they do get sent to Ireland. And I'm going to ask Paddy to take a walk around the corner to the biggest toy shop on the west side of Dublin, and ask him to pick me up a couple. Definitely want to get that Baroness. I'd like to get that Scarlet as well, like for $10.99. In fact, all four of those figures there, I'd say, Paddy, just grab them off the shelves and happy days. And White Army bills.
They're due out on August 1st, so I'll be down there on August 1st to pick them up.
Gonna get that Night Creeper army built up there, Brian.
That would be cool. That would be awesome. In fact, I would actually be really keen to try and do a few dial shots with this new line of figures. I mean, until we get them in hand, we won't really get a sense of kind of, how posable they are. I mean, the promo shots I saw, no real attempt was made to kind of put any kind of pose on the figures. They were just, plonked in front of the camera. It would definitely be an interesting, photo project to work on, to work with these figures. I think they look pretty cool for a $10 figure. I wouldn't feel too bad, picking up a few of them.
Well, they have elbows and knees, so I'm confident that you can do great work with them, because you do great work with the 5-point of articulation, Action Force guys, or the 5-point of articulation, Kenner Star Wars. So we'll do a cheap side plug, Brian, for your Instagram. Where can everybody find your toy photography work?
Instagram. My handle on Instagram is Brian the Hick. And you can see my Brian the Hick there, my name in the live stream here. If you look that up on Instagram, you'll find me. It's the feed right now is a lot of Star Wars stuff, and I've done recreations of all of A New Hope, all of Empire Strikes Back. I'm focusing on the Action Force thing at the moment because obviously the Kickstarter campaign is live, so that's really topical for us at the minute. And then I'll be sharing the Return of the Jedi images after the Kickstarter campaign ends. and that'll run nearly till the end of the year, sharing those. And Paddy has worked with me on that. That's a separate project from our Action Force project. Probably not ready to reveal too much about that at this stage, but we have collaborated on this together, and it's something else we're working towards post our Action Force product.
I tell you, it's truly a divine force which brought you guys together.
Absolutely. Up in the
I
top
love it, because
corner
you
right
wrote an
there.
email of mine and what's on your mind 8 years ago.
Yeah, I'm proud and still a little ashamed, but that's more because I just remember Gary said we had a letter from somebody in Ireland, and I said, "Tell me the guy's name is Paddy," and he said the guy's name is Paddy, and I lost my mind. So it was, anyways.
And it's funny, in that email I sent, I was complaining about how hard it was to find G.I. Joe product, and now look where we are.
Right?
Exactly. We are completely flipped around.
Calling that progress. I like it.
Well, I actually remember that show, and I couldn't believe that there was another G.I. Joe fan in Ireland listening to What's on Joe Mind and writing in. And so I heard that, and on the What's on Joe Mind Facebook page, Paddy had commented or liked some of the posts that were up there. So that's how I actually tracked Paddy down then, after I'd heard that you'd read his letter read on the show. And the first thing I did was I dropped him a message. "You don't know me, but I've got an idea for a G.I. Joe book. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but how about meeting up and let's see what we can do?" And Paddy replied, and he actually said, "Yes."
And I'm like, yes, as long as we meet up in a public place.
Right.
Very public place, yes.
Paddy had several friends waiting at the next table just in case.
Right.
Never once asked to see Brian's basement.
You got to be careful. Yeah, we've had people contact the show and say, "Just send Joe down the stairs. There's a cot waiting." That's the kind of stuff you got to be careful with.
Different kind of letter.
Yeah. Equally enthusiastic, though.
True. And then we do have one more quick news item.
Doo-doo.
Hey, check out that guy.
I mean,
Go full screen here.
I'm trying. Gentle Giant of the 12-inch retro O-ring figure fame has released images of a Storm Shadow bust. This will be the first in a series of similar collectibles from Gentle Giant's website, and I quote, "A Diamond Select Toys release because honor demanded it. It's the first ever G.I. Joe Legends in 3D bust, and it's of Cobra's resident ninja, Storm Shadow. This half-scale bust captures the sword-wielding villain in his trademark white outfit, complete with swords, arrows, throwing stars, and more, and sits atop a sword-hilt pedestal. Limited to only 1,000 pieces, it comes packaged in a full-color box with a numbered certificate of authenticity. Designed by Joe Allard, sculpted by Salvador Gomez. The bust can be pre-ordered now from Gentle Giant. Retail price is $200. So, neat piece of work if that's what you're into.
I mean, Gentle Giant stuff is always tremendous. I was looking at this earlier, and I'm not into busts, so to speak. It's just not my thing. It's great if it's the kind of thing you like. The one thing that eluded me on the site with a quick comb through was size on it.
They said one half scale, 1 to 2.
Wow.
So it's half the size of a human head.
Oh, okay. Well, what? Come on now. All human heads are not created equal.
So if it in
half the size of my head?
In Mark Webber scale, it's a third the size of a human head.
Fair enough. Okay. I had missed that, and that was the one thing I was missing.
We're the big hat club on this show.
Got that right. The Sombrero Club. That's us. It looks great. They didn't call it out, but it also features all that cool stuff on the back.
Yeah.
And also his iconic, "I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler" expression. So that's good.
Now, I wouldn't charge him a lot for that muffler.
No, well, he's not going to pay it. It doesn't matter what you charge. But
I like how he has all of the Snake Eyes movie role play toys on his backpack there as well. That's really nice.
It always strikes me as funny, and I'm not criticizing the detail that they put in here, but you have to think that 99% of the people that buy this stuff that we're looking at here, people are never going to see.
Yeah.
Plus will be facing away from a wall or something. So
unless someone is crazy enough to spend $400 and get two of them, to have one facing forward and one facing back.
Well, show the back again, Mike, because from the front you're like, look at those two swords, right? The katana and the wakizashi, and then you flip it over and you're like, oh no, they're just steak knives.
Yes.
They don't even go all the way through the backpack. They're just,
they're more for stabby than for slicey.
Yeah. So I mean, I get it. I see why you can't put them any further, but it is cool, and Gentle Giant is great stuff. So if this is your thing, I bet you'll be really pleased with it.
Yeah, if you're big on the statuary, that's not a bad place to go.
Yeah, and good for them to grab Storm Shadow and go with the classic look, because the movie look is a little different, and that's fine. But there really hasn't been, even the classified Storm Shadow was, that Arctic version. There hasn't been much classic Storm Shadow product out there in a long, long time. So this is a really smart first character for them to do.
I mean, this is a beautiful piece of art. It really is magnificent looking. I'm not a statue collector myself, but I do recall that a couple of years back, I was at a meeting in one of the big design agencies in Dublin, and the owner of the agency was a big fan of Gentle Giant, and he had the entire offices. Basically had his Gentle Giant collection all over the place. So in reception area, on the stairwells, in the design studios, in the meeting rooms, and the place just looked really, really cool. A big emphasis on maybe more kind of like Marvel and DC characters. So I didn't see any, there's no Joe product in the mix, but it was very impressive looking in the workspace, and it really made the studio look pretty freaking cool. So again, this is magnificent looking. Probably not something that I would, buy into myself, but there's definitely a market out there for these kind of products, and it's going to look great in somebody's boardroom or reception area for sure.
Or as a really expensive duck pin bowling, ball. So either way, I mean, half scale.
I was thinking paperweight, right? Because it's going to be heavy.
Yeah, it's going to be. But so that's the news. Mark.
Boop, boop, boop.
He's our substitute sound effects guy. So
I'm the backup. Well, I'm the understudy.
We got to prompt him a little bit.
Yeah, it's fine. No, I was just like Joe, a little bit late.
We're making fun of Joe Colton, but Joe Colton's always there with sound effects. She's always, well, sort of, when she's paying attention.
Yeah.
She's gonna curse us out so bad next week.
And where does all that money go?
The official all the cool stuff swear jar.
We're fundraising.
You too can contribute to the swear jar. The link is down below. We call it a coffee account, but there it is. But it is set up. The verbiage is there. You're not buying us anything. You are donating swears to the Joe Colton swear jar. And that is courtesy of all the cool stuff. So that brings us to today's real order of business. Only 45 minutes of catching up, tangent stories, and news later. But here we are. I have Kickstarter authors on our show. I guess we should probably talk about your book.
Yay! Yes.
There you go. Release that inner hooligan.
Well, first, thanks a million, guys, for getting us on to talk about our book. Like we're really excited about this book, and getting a chance to be on the live stream with you to talk about it is, really I've been looking forward to it now all week. And Mike, I think the last time we spoke Action Force, we were arguing over, is it a laser exterminator or is it a red HAL? And it's a laser exterminator.
It is.
We generally agreed.
They are the jungle laser exterminator, and the red HAL. So that way we've got them both.
Got them both, yeah.
Yeah, the HAL is the jungle laser exterminator, and the laser exterminator is the red HAL. We just swap names. That way we're both wrong and we're both right.
Yeah, I can live with that. It's the perfect compromise.
It's that communications degree at work. So anyways, we talked a little bit about your history, how you met on our very program, or as a result of our very program.
Yes.
Your previous projects, of course, Total Retaliation, and Total Hacks. Which,
yes.
Not as bad as it sounds. Not
that's the subtitle for our show.
Right.
Actually, yeah.
The beginner. It's what's on Joe Mind, Total Hacks.
Total Hacks. Accent on the colon.
But here we are with Action Force, the battle years. Hopefully followed by Action Force, the high school years.
Followed by Action Force, the Wonder Years.
And we're going to get around to the Marvel years as well at some point. But that's a whole separate book to this.
A whole separate 2,000-page book because of the volume of product that was released as a Marvel Action Force stuff.
So,
well, we put a bit of kind of context on it. We've had a massive lockdown over the last year, and last year when the lockdown kind of kicked off, I started going back over my my Battle Action Force comic, which I have somewhere up there. I got them out and was having a read through them while I was locked down, and realized, having stories that I hadn't looked at in a long time, we're decades, how really, really cool they were, both in terms of the artwork and in terms of the writing that's on them. And it got me thinking about, there's a big story here in the Action Force history that that really needs to be told. So immediately reached out to Paddy, who's my partner in crime for all these books, and we started to brainstorm out an idea of how could we tell that Action Force story. And there's a number of components to that story. I mean, obviously it begins with Palatoy and the toy line that comes out of that, but the comic itself, Battle Action Force, was critical to kind of marketing the Palatoy's Action Force, and at that time it had no connection to G.I. Joe. There were a few vehicle repaints and drivers for those vehicles repainted, but the continuity was completely separate from what was happening over in America at that same time. And the more we kind of started to talk about this and brainstorm back and forth what we could do, we realized that there's a fantastic story to tell, both on say with the Palatoy design team and the manufacturing team there, and then on the marketing side with the comic and those stories. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the people who are making those comics were the greatest writers and artists in the British comics industry at that time. When I think, and I from listening to What's on Your Mind, I know that G.I. Joe fans, they know who Larry Hama is. They know who Buzz Dixon is. They know even, who Kirk Bazigian is, and all their contributions to the G.I. Joe mythology. Over on this side of the pond, do people really know who Jerry Day is? Do they know who, John Cooper or Jim Watson or Frank Noble, these great writers and great artists? Like, they're not celebrated in the Action Force fandom the way the American creators are. That was where the story really started for me, was to look at this wealth of talent. When you look at a writer like Jerry Day, maybe he's not familiar to a lot of your American listeners or viewers, but he's the creator of Road Trooper, and that's probably his most successful character that he ever created for 2000 AD. But he created a whole host of characters and stories for the British comics industry before he moved away from comics altogether. So he's a huge name associated with Action Force. And similarly on the art side of it as well, Cam Kennedy is an Action Force artist, and he's probably better known in America for his Star Wars work on Dark Empire. But we're talking great creatives, helped to create and build that Action Force mythology. in comic book form. And I suppose that the comics is kind of my baby. I get really excited about that. But Paddy, I'm sure, can weigh in there and paint just as exciting a picture on the product design side and the toys themselves.
So before we leave the comics behind, though, explain for the folks at home who maybe aren't as familiar. You said, we touched on it a little bit, but Duke and Scarlet and Stalker and Snake Eyes were not a part of Action Force right out of the gate. What did Battle focus on? So
if I flash back really quick on the history of Action Force, the very first series, what we call Series 1, where they were just like shrunken down versions of the 12-inch Action Man to 3 3/4 inch scale. So they took the top 12 best-selling 12-inch figures, shrunk them down, and there was no mythology around them. They had no kind of character names or profiles or backstories or anything like that. There wasn't even a comic at that point. But at some point in the very, very quickly in the history of Action Force, those first 12 Series 1 figures were redeveloped into, all that tooling was repurposed into the 4 Action Force squads: Z Force, SAS Force, Space Force, and Q Force, and then the enemy, which was led by Baron Ironblood and the Red Shadows organization. And the mythology was then built around them. So when the comic Battle had to pitch for the license, the Action Force license, to bring that into their kind of publishing stable, they bust out of the onto the scene with the battle for Ascendancy Island. That's the very first Action Force story, where Baron Ironblood and his Red Shadows take over Ascendancy Island, and Action Force have to come in and recapture the island back from them. That was really where the story started, and that ran through 83, 84, and as we move into 1985, Palitoy shut down their design studio and started to bring in more Hasbro products into the UK market. So there was a retconning process happened at that point with the story World Enemy Number 1, where Baron Ironblood reinvents himself as Cobra Commander. And then on the back of that story, we have a story called Top Sergeant Duke, where Duke is then recruited by Action Force to expand the Action Force team to deal with this new Cobra threat. And that's when we start to see the first American or Hasbro characters appearing in the universe then.
Yeah, but they're actually quite different to the ones you'd be familiar with from the G.I. Joe mythology. They're all from various countries around Europe. Scarlet is Belgian, for example. So they're not exactly the same characters as you guys would have had in the Real American Hero at the same time. Even though they're based on the same toys, and the toys are pretty much identical as well. The figures, in that last series 3 of Action Force, but again, they decide to go on in a completely different way with the storylines for those characters.
And the message boards just lit up, right? Scarlet's Belgian. What is this crap? This is not my G.I. Joe. Yeah, I remember it.
No, that's not G.I. Joe. She's Action Force,
right?
I have a few issues with the Action Force comic, and they focused on Footloose, and I was amused. Of course, I got him as an adult, and so I was amused because they were portraying Footloose because he had a mustache. They gave him like that proper English officer's mustache, little curls on the end of it,
and made him scrunch as well.
Yeah, he was very upstanding and proper, and it was just like.
But it's funny how much he actually gets a lot of screen time in the Marvel Action Force comic. Footloose, because it's funny, they focus on, as you were saying with the Snake Eyes trailer earlier on, they really focused on the completely different characters over here as well. Like Roebuck got a lot more character time in the comics here than he ever did in the States.
Well, Footloose is a good example because he's
the main characters in Sorry, Mark.
Footloose is
and Footloose as well, obviously, he didn't have any really American screen time. He shows up to drive the armadillo at one point. Yeah. Whereas over here, he's a major character.
I mean, Footloose is never a character, really, in any iteration of Joe over here. Just a forgotten guy with a lot of potential, a very cool toy, but there's no Footloose story out here, really.
He was fun on the Sunbow cartoons, but he never got that Spotlight episode.
Yeah.
But so anyways, I cut you off before, Brian. You were going to transition over so Paddy could talk again.
Yeah, I never stop. So the toy line, of course, is developed. It's funny. It was developed simultaneously. So America and Europe arrived at the same idea at the same time, a 4-inch military line. But they developed completely separately. And Palitoy,
because we're both the best.
Palitoy at the time were obviously producing the Star Wars toys for the European market. So they saw an opportunity to Action Man wasn't selling as well as it had been. And they thought, well, why don't we downsize them to the same scale as Star Wars? And this decision was taken quite late in the day. There was an upcoming toy fair happening not too long after that decision had been taken to downsize them. So Palitoy were kind of up against a tight timeline to get prototypes ready for that toy fair. And that's the reason why they went for 5 points of articulation on those first figures, because they were used to engineering that sort of stuff with the Kenner Star Wars line. So they thought, well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We'll keep them in the same sort of scale, same kind of construction as what we're doing. And that's why they chose that 5 POA. Now, because they had a link to Hasbro through the mutual development of G.I. Joe and Action Man, Hasbro reached out to them and basically said, well, do you want some of our vehicles to use to flesh out that line? And Palitoy took actually nearly all of the first year of G.I. Joe vehicles turn up in Palitoy Action Force. In fact, I think all of them do. And they took the vehicle drivers as well, because they fully articulated G.I. Joe style figures could fit in the vehicles better. So you ended up getting
figures into the SAS Panther. It's difficult.
It's tough to get those five POAs to Panther, for example. You just can't. They don't bend right to fit in that driving seat. So they took, existing vehicles, and like I said, nearly all of the vehicles made it over here in repainted forms, and they took quite a few of the Action Force or G.I. Joe characters and repainted them to match up with the team's concept they were rolling out at the time. So as I was saying, we did get Snake Eyes' figure. He's painted he has grey faceplate instead of just all black. I have him up there on the shelf behind me. As renamed Stalker, we got Scarlet repainted in Z-Force colors as Quarrel. We got the Cobra Trooper was repainted in SAS colors to be Hunter. You got Cobra Commander painted as Red Laser. You got Destro painted as the Red Jackal, and they were all packed in with repainted G.I. Joe vehicles. There was also a handful of original vehicles as well. So obviously most American fans would be familiar with the Robo Skull, which is a unique toy to here. And Palitoy carried forward vehicles that developed for Series 1 of Action Force. So it's kind of a funny toy line in that there's a mishmash of lots of different elements in there. You've got American toys and vehicles mixed in with British toys and vehicles, and they don't have the same articulation. They don't have the same styling. The one thing I would say is I think when Palitoy brought over the American stuff, the American vehicles in particular, Palitoy really went all out with additional paint applications and so on. So if you compare the RAM cycle to the Z-Force Rapid Fire cycle, there's really no comparison. Like the amount of paint apps and additional stickers and so on the Palitoy version is huge. I don't even think there are any paint apps in that original RAM cycle at all. It's just green plastic. Whereas Palitoy are just like, we're just going to put everything on here. And it looks very, very different.
Maybe the seat, but the seat is a different piece of plastic. So no,
that's right. It's a different plastic color. Whereas Palitoy are like, we're just going to slap on paint on it. The other example is probably the APC, whereas that was almost completely retooled in the interior to turn it from a troop carrier into a playset. So it has different seating, it has a medical aid station, it has a communications bay, it has weapons racks, it has additional weapons on the turret, and of course, tons more paint apps.
Beautiful thing.
So it's almost like a completely different vehicle.
Yeah, it's one of the few Palatoy vehicles I have is the ATC, and it is a treasured piece because it. And I was always like, I like the APC even because I always felt like it served a purpose. But man, that ATC is a heck of a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great.
And I think
great
it carries over to the other vehicles as well. You know.
I mean, that was part of that relationship with Palatoy and Hasbro. You know, even when you look at their Action Man line, which is your 12-inch GI Joes, on the Palatoy side of it, they were enhancing the products and then giving those enhancements back to Hasbro to us. Like, obviously the Kung Fu grip hands would be like a really good example, of the flocked hair, and even improvements to the overall kind of body, the physique of the action figure as well. So there was I suppose a mindset of kind of continuous improvements with the products with the design team in Palatoy.
It's actually something that came up in one of the interviews I did with the tooling manager at Palatoy. He mentioned that they thought that the Hasbro were really terrible at tooling. He thought that they were much better at it. He actually specifically gave the example of the original 12-inch Action Man, where Hasbro had everything on one tool. And so at one point, the leg portion of the tooling got damaged and Hasbro had to junk the entire thing. So they basically told Hasbro, why don't you make your own tooling if you're so good at it? And they did. And so they made their own separate Action Man body type, where it's called version 2 Action Man tooling, where it's actually a much better, it's got he's got abs and everything sculpted in and things like that. And they did it on multiple separate tools to avoid something breaking like that in future and ruining an entire tool. So he gave that as an example of something that they did kind of expressly against Hasbro's wishes, but then Hasbro ended up copying that on their end for G.I. Joe, the 12-inch G.I. Joe later on.
Like, where all this kind of information is coming from is obviously myself and Paddy have done, fair bit of research on this, like looking online, and you have to give credit to people like Dave Tree, because so much of the Action Force history has been unearthed by Dave, and he's put it out there for fans to consume, across all the different platforms. But in addition to that kind of our own research, we've actually been very very grateful that people like Bob Brecken and Roger Morrison have agreed to let us interview them. These are former Palatoy staff, and they've agreed to let us interview them about their time at Hasbro. So we're getting these first-hand accounts from these Palatoy staff, the people who are there on the ground, on the front line, designing the product, manufacturing the product, and getting their stories into this book. So the book really is going to tell that Action Force story from straight out from the horse's mouth, so to speak, on the Palatoy side of it, and similarly on the comic side of it. We're working with Dave McDonald's. Dave is a micro publisher who has a good working relationship with Rebellion Publishing in the UK, and through his contacts, he'll be talking to the few surviving members from the comics creative team to get the comic side of the story into the book. Most of the people who worked on the comics have passed away. Obviously it's been a very, very long time, and a lot of them were already very late into their career when they worked on Action Force. Mm-hmm. But there's still some great talent from that era still alive today, and Dave is talking to them to bring their story into the book. And then, of course, it's going to be full of photography, the dial photography that that people who kind of follow my stuff on Instagram or via the Full Force site would have seen a lot of that stuff. And the best bit is that Rebellion Publishing have agreed to let us include loads of the vintage comic art from the 1980s in the book as well. So we're reproducing that artwork so that it looks as good as it looked back in the 1980s.
Okay.
Yeah, this is actually the first officially licensed Action Force product in 35 years.
Easy, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
We
Yeah,
we
so
knew.
we're quite proud of that. That took a bit of doing to get, but we're proud we got that because we really wanted to, be above board and say, well, we wanted to use the art for certain. You can't really tell the story of the comics without using it. So we made sure we reached out to, the license holders and the copyright holders to say, look, can we do this? And got their legal sign off on it. So that's really exciting about this as well, I think.
Without getting into the specifics of it or anything you can't talk about, did that take a long time? Was that hard to do, or was it receptive and pretty quick?
Rebellion were very, very helpful. Rebellion, they bought the comics art rights when they bought IPC's entire back catalog. So Rebellion have they'd be best known obviously to Americans probably as the publisher of 2000 AD and Judge Dredd and those characters. So they have been slowly buying up the rights to a lot of that existing British comics artwork from various smaller companies that did comics throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they got IPC's catalogue as part of one of those purchases. And they have been reprinting, historical British comics, doing very nice, very handsome kind of hardcover and trade paperback collections of various runs on, famous runs on comics. They've done some on Dan Dare stories. They recently did the Trigan Empire, which is a very famous comic in the 70s here that was never been published, previously been reprinted. So they were actually very receptive when we reached out and said, look, this is what we're planning to do. It's a fan project. We know there's a limited market for it. We don't think we're going to sell thousands of copies of this book. And they were like, well, yeah, we'll sort you out a license for that as long as you can get Hasbro on board with it. And Hasbro took a little bit of doing, but we got them in the end. It literally involved myself and Brian emailing every person in Hasbro we could get a name for.
Yeah, no kidding.
But eventually we got to the right people, and they signed off on allowing us to use their IP for the book.
Can you name drop the Hasbro people that were helpful, or is it better left unsaid?
It was a lot of. I'm not going to name names exactly, but I'll say the people in Hasbro Publishing and Hasbro PR were very, very helpful.
I know the guy at Hasbro Publishing. He's great.
You know who we're probably talking about.
Yeah, he's got a kilt, so it probably was a good conversation.
Rock and roll. In fairness, they actually were super helpful on the Hasbro side of it. They, we reached out to America first because we didn't think we had to go to the UK. We thought America was the place to go, so we reached out to some contacts over there, and they, as helpful as they weren't 100% sure who needed to, deal with our particular query. So our query ended up, in a roundabout way, ended up being redirected back to the UK. And trying to get contact with the UK was quite difficult with, a lot of kind of home working and, due to the pandemic. It was tough to get in touch with the contacts in the UK. But once we did, we got sorted reasonably quickly. So it was more a case of trying to track down the right person, the right department that could sort it out. And once that happened, it all fell into place very, very quickly after that.
I'm so glad you guys got connected with smart people who are open-minded about it, because, your book can only help their IP, right? So
that's exactly what we said. I mean, the book really is about preserving the legacy of Action Force. And it's a great legacy. It's worth preserving. There's great toys. There's great creatives involved in bringing those toys to life. So that's really it. The whole book is trying to tell that very, very big story, and it's our most ambitious book to date. If you look at something like say Total Retaliation, I think it's 80 pages, something like that.
80 pages.
Total Hacks was 96 pages. We're, for our minimum funding goal, if we hit that minimum funding goal of 27K, we're bringing in a book of 176 pages. and it'll be an oversized hardback coffee table book. And then I've got somebody pointing at my phone and asking for some screen time. I'm going to have to sort that out now in a sec. If we hit our first stretch goal, which I'm really excited about, and I would love that if we could get that far, it's going to introduce another 32 pages into the book, all about the unreleased Special Weapons Force. Paddy's very well placed to talk about Special Weapons Force.
Yeah, so this is kind of a lost Action Force team that never got produced. They had been planning to do 5 Action Force teams and then the enemy team, and who that 5th team would be was split between 3 or 4 different concepts. And the one that got furthest along and which nearly made it was Special Weapons Force, which included a repainted Flash as Bombardier, and 4 new figures based on existing Palatoy sculpts. And that Bombardier figure obviously has a bit of a story in the G.I. Joe fandom, because he had been, prototype had been found and nobody knew what the hell it was for quite a long time, until Dave Tree turned up a prototype in a museum. And they eventually discovered this whole entire lost team. So what we've done is there's a very talented customizer here in Ireland, Ray Murphy, who's done a number of G.I. Joe and Action Force related projects, and we reached out to him and said, well, how hard would it be for you to redo this entire team with the existing, the old product, repaint the Palatoy product, repaint the Hasbro product, and build those new characters, build those characters again. So he's done that for us, and the idea is that we will do a photo, there'll be 32 pages covering off the history of that team, covering off biographies for that team, and then tons of Brian's photography of what those figures would have been had they made it out. When
Ray Murphy's in the comments.
Is he? Ray's done amazing work. So he's done all of the figures and all of the vehicles, and even a couple of his own creations. What could have happened had Palatoy created, and gone on and got that team out. So I think that's very interesting, and I think that story is very interesting as to how close you got to having, an entire new sub team, using Hasbro product as well. And like I said, it was a mystery for a long time as to who those figures were. So I think it's an interesting story for G.I. Joe fans.
Paddy is adding a whole new level of intrigue as it gets darker and darker.
It gets slowly darker. Here, I'll turn on the light.
Paddy is almost becoming a special effect over there.
Right.
But
it's moonlighting.
There we go.
Oh, hey! Now he looks angelic.
I kind of like the shadowy cloak and dagger thing we had going on there. Yeah.
It's almost Paddy the Devil there.
Right. Telling us about the secret force that no one knows about.
Brian, you were talking about your photography. We have some of this queued up and ready to go. You want to show off some of your art?
Yeah, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. What are we looking at?
Well, I'll tell you, this first picture here, one of my favorite Action Force toys is the Sea Lion, which is a submarine. And what you see here is the pilot of that submarine, Dolphin, riding on one of the kind of detachable, smaller submersibles. And then in the background behind him, you've got his fellow Q-Force diver, Shark, in the Stingray. And this is a little shot that I set up in the studio here. It's nothing is actually underwater. It's all just kind of lighting and effects to kind of create that illusion. But it was a nice challenge to kind of play with the different kind of toys and characters to see what I could do in terms of trying to create that underwater effect. And if I just flick to another image in that screen, you should be able to see the Q-Force leader called Leviathan underwater, and there's a bit of a Kraken sneaking up on him. The Kraken is one of Baron Ironblood's evil creations, so it's kind of the Red Shadow's only underwater weapon in their arsenal. So the Kraken was kind of designed by Bob Brecken initially with kind of a more like an eel-like face, and then the marketing department wanted some changes made, so he has more like a dragon kind of face now. In terms
I've always liked that Leviathan figure because you'll see there he includes the jump pack, but because he'd no corresponding hole in his back, like the G.I. Joe figures had, they included rubber bands in the package so you could stick the jump pack on his backpack as his backpack.
Whatever makes it work, man.
Yeah, 100%. So, and then just the last picture that I'll just show here is probably my ultimate favorite toy of all time, the Robo Skull, and basically laying into a squad of Z-Force troops. We have in the foreground, we've got the Mobat and Steeler, which would have been the Z-Force battle tank. I think the code names, they carried over the code name Steeler as well for the driver. And then the Z-Force medic, an infantryman in the center ground there, and the Z-Force sapper at the overturned jeep, kind of trying to battle off this huge flying skull that's kind of laying waste to everything in its path.
That's an incredible photo.
Yeah, and I've gotten to watch these guys in action, putting together these. Like there was a program they did at Rollout Roll Call the last time I was there, where they basically built a street scene out of a bunch of old cardboard boxes, and did it in the space of an hour, to the point where if you were taking photos of it, it looked pretty convincing. So I have no doubt that this explosion effect was done with 2 twigs and a wrapper from a McDonald's quarter pounder.
And a fish hook.
It's actually it's painted cotton wool, right, Brian? The backlit.
Painted cotton wool with a lamp sitting behind it, and I mean, if I break that shot down real quick, I mean, we basically have the background behind the Robo Skull is just a sheet of paper. I've painted it black, and I've punched some holes in that paper, and then I've put a light behind that. So that gives that sort of, kind of spray or, fireball spray off the explosion around the Robo Skull. Then the Robo Skull is the next object in the set. So it's basically on a kind of a glass jar. It's just standing on an upturned glass jar. And I've got a couple of muzzle flash effects, which are just blue tacked onto the guns of the top left and right of the Robo Skull. And then my cotton wool and lamp sit in front of that. That's my explosion. And then it's just setting up the other characters in the scene, like the upturned jeep, the few characters trying to make a run for it, and the tank. And then it's just a little bit of sand from the stuff that you would buy in a pet store, or for like a lizard tank. Just sprinkle a little bit of sand down, and now it looks like you're out in the desert. It actually reminds me of how in the movie Retaliation, when the helicopters come in and take out the entire G.I. Joe squad, it should have been a Robo Skull that came in and took out the G.I. Joe squad. So that's me just trying to retcon G.I. Joe Retaliation right there.
That'd be more believable, I think, as well.
I think they were trying to buy a legit complete Robo Skull for that movie, and it just wasn't in the budget. They couldn't afford it.
I mean,
They just couldn't find one.
Even buying a toy nowadays is very expensive. So,
but it's your set construction, Brian. It's so simple that it's genius.
Yeah, but I love that the Robo Skull is slightly out of focus, which it could be if it was in the background anyway. But it lends to the illusion of heat from the explosion, distorting the visual of the skull. It's really incredible.
Or even just the kinetics of how fast it's moving.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great work. And
Brian, do you have the Q-Force print image available? Because actually, I think that's one of my favorites as well. You've done recently.
Oh, yeah. Let me do. What I'll do is I'll stop sharing just for a sec, and then I'm going to share a new window.
That's one of I don't have any Action Force in my collection, and that's something I need to get after. But one of the things I really
funny,
want.
actually, and it's something that one of the Palatoy staff said to me in one of the interviews. The production manager Palatoy mentioned that it's surprisingly easy to find Palatoy Action Force stuff still, because it was so sturdily constructed that a lot of it has survived, whereas even G.I. Joe figures from the time, crotches break, fingers break, thumbs break, but the Palatoy stuff, you can still find loose and complete examples very easily because it was just so sturdily made, and the 5-point of articulation construction lent to, things staying together. So, getting the figures actually complete is not difficult. Finding them packaged and complete is difficult, but loose and complete is not.
That's something I'm gonna have to look into, because I love the stuff that wasn't GI Joe, wasn't brought over from Hasbro. That Sea Lion is incredible, and as a big Steeler fan, I've always known that I was going to be after that tank and that version of Steeler at some point.
I think, Brian, how much did you pay for your Steeler? Like 30 euro?
Yeah, I mean, I only picked him up there kind of recently, so it was probably around that. So it wasn't, it wasn't. You wouldn't consider it crazy money by any stretch, And then the tank as well, obviously, was separate, to that.
I mean, as we know, 30 euro is about 600 American dollars.
In reality, it's about $35, which isn't bad for a complete vintage Joe anyway.
No, you could pay that for a bat attachment these days over here. So for a flamethrower to go on your bat's arm. So
it's a little nuts on the vintage stuff right now. A little crazy.
Yeah, the Palatoy stuff is getting more expensive. I think it's because a lot of Star Wars vintage collectors ran out of Star Wars vintage stuff to buy, and then jumped onto the Palatoy stuff because it's like, well, it's the same construction, and I remember this too. But this is probably my favorite image of Brian so far for the campaign. The two-leveled Q-Force entire team, where you built essentially a fish tank with a perspex level covered in plastic to make the waves, and then the lower tier is the bottom half of the perspex tank, lit to look like it's under the sea. So I really love this image. Just the fact that you were able to get them all in one shot as well.
I mean, it's great with a team like, say, Q-Force, and the same with Space Force. They're much smaller teams in terms of what Palatoy produced. So it was easy to create, say, a single team image that could have a lot going on and still show off all of the team. But it's more challenging with a squad like, say, Z-Force. Z-Force is huge. The number of characters, the number of vehicles. It's, you could do a shot where you cram it all in, but it would just look really busy. So we'll be dropping our Z-Force team shot over the weekend. So, do keep an eye out on social media. That is going to drop. And that's one of the, I think it's the SAS Squad Leader reward on our Kickstarter campaign, is that you get the book, but you also get 4 8x10 prints, and we've revealed 2 of them so far, Q-Force and Space Force. And you also get an A3, Boss Fight Studios, or Katrina Cerise Aranya and Eric Aranya's reinterpretation of G.I. Joe issue number 1 with Action Force characters on the front cover. So that's a really beautiful piece of art from Katrina and Eric.
And so real quick, while we still got some time, let's talk about pledge levels on your Kickstarter. And this is all in euros. 27,000 euros is your goal, correct?
Yes.
And that comes up to just a hair under $33,000. As of this second, looks like you are at 19 or 17,921, which is 14,651 euro. So better than halfway there. 13 days to go. You can make a 10 euro pledge, which is about $13, and that is the Z-Force Infantry level. That is receiving credit on the contributor pages of the book. At 120 euro, which is $147, is the Kraken level. That is one printed copy of Total Action Force, the Battle Years, shipped to wherever you are, and you receive credit on the contributor pages. So, for most of our audience here in the U.S., about $150 to make that happen. And you had made mention that you wanted to discuss why. I mean, I think it kind of speaks to itself. You're basically building a piece of reference material here. You've got a lot of folks to pay off with this, but go into that some.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, on when you try and compare that price to, say, you walk into a brick and mortar store, you could see a book of a similar size for maybe $20-30 or €20-30. But you have to remember that the quantity that we're producing is just in the low hundreds. If we were expecting to get, say, 1,000 or 2,000 backers on this, we could have costed and priced everything at a lower price, because the more of your quantity you produce, the lower the unit cost is. But because we've taken a look at, say, the previous Action Force books that were put out by Blood for the Baron, and they were getting backers in the region of around 300. So we're kind of expecting to get something in and around kind of a similar number of backers. So we have to look at our production costs, which means to produce a high quality book, hardback, oversized, that is as good quality wise as anything that you would expect to buy on Amazon or in a major brick and mortar store. But to do that at such a small quantity is really, really expensive. And you can look at other
really expensive. Like, you could send people to the moon for less.
Well, you look at other Kickstarter projects that are out there that, again, they're high quality hardback books that are slightly oversized. And there's been a couple of Star Wars books in that kind of space that have dealt with, say, the vintage Kenner toys, and they're pushing numbers of say £75 or $125. While they're a little bit cheaper than ours, you can see that they're aiming for like 1,000 backers, 1,500 backers, 2,000 backers.
And also they didn't include shipping in their pledge levels. You had to add on shipping, so it was 125 plus shipping. Whereas we're trying to be fair to people and say, well, we'll include the shipping so you know exactly what you're paying. We're lucky enough in Ireland that our postal system has a special rate for shipping books. So it's not that expensive to ship books from here. Like, it's expensive, but not as expensive as you would think it would be to ship something from here to America or here to Europe or here to China. So we were able to build in and say, well, we know the price of the shipping is going to be, so we can say to people, no matter where you are in the world, this pledge level, this pledge amount will get you the book delivered to your doorstep. So we wanted to be open with that, rather than saying it's 100 plus shipping cost, which yourself, shipping cost to America from anywhere, or to Ireland to America would be quite expensive. So at least this way we were able to say to people, well, we'll budget for shipping costs and include that in the price so that everybody gets to pay the same price, and there's no surprises after you pledge,
So once it's done, it's done.
Once it's done, it's done.
And you got to remember, it is the people who, assuming that we fund this, the people who get books into their hands, it's going to be a very small group of people who are going to actually have that book. It's going to be rare. It's going to be very hard to get. And you look at other kind of good reference books that are out of print. You can see them on there on Amazon and on eBay. Like, they're a couple of $100, $300. There's a demand for kind of high end books, aimed at collectors. And that's the kind of product that we wanted to create here, was something that was really beautiful, much better quality than what we, in terms of finish, than what we produce for Total Hacks or Total Retaliation, and much more ambitious in terms of the amount of content and the kind of story that we're trying to tell with this book.
Hey, it's Racktime Rob. Everybody give him a big hand.
Hey!
Plus, we have to pay for license, so there's that too.
Yeah, there's that as well.
I was unfortunately, we do not have the Merv Griffin theme queued up and ready to go there, but whatever. But anyways, so yes, it's really your one chance to get on this book. It's not, they're not printing up a bunch of spares to take around the convention circuit for the next 5 years to sell to you there. No, this is.
We figure the magic number is if we get 220 backers to buy a book, we'll be able to print 250 books. So myself and Brian will want to keep a couple of copies each for ourselves. I'm sure we want to make sure that anybody we interview gets a copy. So that's another 10 or 12 gone. And then we need to make sure the license holders get some copies as well, because they've asked for that. So essentially, we won't have any spares. At least I'm not expecting we'll have any spares once if we just hit our regular goal. I don't think we'll have any spares to go around.
Yeah, so we need to make sure that we get them to that number.
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is going to be, if you have any interest in Action Force, this is a book you really want to get your hands on, not just to read about the story, but you want to see those toys brought to life in a way that you haven't seen before. We're not talking about half a dozen dio photos here. We're talking close to 100 dios. It's a epic photographic project that's going to be included in that. You get your main 5 squads. We hit that first stretch goal. We're going to get our Special Weapons Force team in there. We hit the second stretch goal, which I really hope we do, because I'm particularly excited to bring in the 1985 pallet toy releases, which is effectively that first wave of Hasbro product. That's your Duke, your Scarlet, your Gung Ho, Stalker, Roadblock, Torpedo.
Yeah.
Superb, Hasbro toys that kind of really, took Action Force to another level. It's
not to mention your Flash.
If you don't love Flash, 100%.
Big up for Flash on the cover.
And you know what? Vanyo's illustration of Flash, the Vanyo brothers, they are like the Robert Atkins of today. Their work is so dynamic, it's so precise, it's detailed. Compared to some of the other great artists who are more traditional in their approach, the Vanyo brothers really shook things up visually with their aesthetic. They were ahead of their game, ahead of their time in the early 80s. And they illustrated Flash across a number of stories. And they do his origin story as well. Just as you mentioned, Flash and Vanyo, great combo, goes great. But those figures, they will be our second stretch goal. That's another 48 pages going into the book. Like, it's just, we'd have 256 pages all in if we get the 1985 releases unlocked and included in the book as well. And then our final stretch goal, which it really is a big push to get there, we bring in Ian Kennedy, who is a living legend in the comics industry, and Ian's going to do a brand new front cover for the book if we can unlock that particular goal.
Excellent. And what is the figure that you have to get to that point?
That's €68,000.
Okay.
Ian's commission rates are a lot. But Ian would have been the quintessential science fiction artist in British comics. Like, he would have drawn Dan there for quite some time. The guy draws a spaceship like you would not believe. And he works in watercolors and paints. Like, he doesn't do things digitally or anything like that. He's old school. Like, he's probably nearly 80 now. Would I be right in thinking that, Brian?
I think you're pretty spot on there, Paddy.
Yeah, so he's close to 80, and he would be doing an A2 painted commission for the cover. So that would be very, very big. It's a lot of work, but it would feature tons of characters, all the vehicles. I just want to see him draw the Triad Fighter and the Roboskull. I think that'd be gorgeous.
Like, Ian's not doing like a convention sketch. He's doing a professional art commission. Like, despite his age, Ian still works professionally, so he's not retired. He still does. He still works with the publisher DC Thompson, who actually would have been a competitor to IPC magazines back in the day. And so if you're familiar with the title Commando, Ian regularly does covers for that particular publication, and they're just magnificent paintings. They're beautiful.
I'd actually suggest people check out his social media. He's been doing a lot of Action Force commissions lately. He did an amazing Cobra Rattler there last week, I think.
Nice.
Again, fully painted up Cobra Rattler. If you check Ian Kennedy Art on Instagram or Twitter, he did a Cobra Rattler a couple of weeks ago, and he did a Masked Rhino cover commission as well, which is fabulous. Yeah.
So Kevin McCaffrey has fingers crossed for stretch goals. Don't just cross your fingers, man.
Yeah.
Share that Kickstarter on social media. Get it around into all of your collecting circles. Pledge yourself. Get your good friends to maybe pitch in. Maybe you guys can share a book. Do what you have to do to help this get done. Because again, we're printing. I'm making it sound like I'm in on this, but Paddy and Brian are trying to create a reference material for the ages here. We're trying to put something together that is truly timeless and captures the great work that was done on this line back 35, 40 years ago almost.
Yes.
While we got you here, we're going to take one question. There is one question in the crowd that's specific to you guys. I'm curious what your attitudes were when they came out about the re-releases. I'm going to guess this means the figures. Examples being Quarrel becoming Scarlet, or you had a breaker and then get our breaker later, things like that. So if you guys were collecting Action Force when that happened, feel about that?
I didn't notice that Quarrel and Scarlet were the same figure for fucking years.
Swear jar!
It's quality use of it too, right?
I swear to God, I did not realize it as a kid at all. They were the same figure, colored differently.
Well, you know, I just accepted it.
Why did you tell us that on the air, Paddy? Why did you tell us that?
Will I tell you something that I am ashamed to admit, but I only realized like 2 years ago. I didn't realize that the Shadow Track and the Space Force Cosmic Cruiser are basically the same vehicle.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? It's not really that obvious.
There's so much new tooling in it that you wouldn't realize that the base undercarriage is the same and all the rest of it is different.
We do
but I just
comparison here.
Yeah. So
the Scarlet Quarrel thing never.
The Cosmic Cruiser uses bits from Star Wars. It uses bits from the Ram Cycle. Its cannons are the Ram Cycle's cannons. So you can tell that the front piece is the same, but otherwise they're almost completely different. And it didn't occur to me for years that they were the same vehicle.
So the Scarlet Quarrel thing was totally under your radar?
Yeah, totally under my radar. Didn't cop it until like I was a teenager. When I was collecting them again. I realized, these are the same character. And it's funny because, I knew like Prowl and Blue Streak and Smokescreen were the same toy. And I knew, the Decepticon Seekers were the same toy. But I didn't see it with the two Action Force figures.
Yeah, wait till you meet my friend Glenda. She's great.
I didn't notice there was a Glenda until the 25th figure came out. I actually have her over there in my display case. But again, I didn't know that repaint of her existed. But yeah, I just didn't cop it for so long. They were the same thing.
Just to weigh in on that one, within the comics, they're completely different characters. Because when you read about Quarrel and Z Force, you're never at any stage thinking when Scarlet gets introduced that they're the same characters at all. I never had a Scarlet figure. I had a Quarrel and the Z Force motorcycle as a toy. I never had a Scarlet. So I never had the two figures side by side to compare as a kid. Obviously, when I, much later, when the internet is a thing, and I'm, rediscovering all those childhood interests, and you can clearly see, that they're totally the same figures. One's just a repaint. But back then, as a kid, that wasn't obvious to me. Similarly, with there's a breaker in the Series 2 Palatoy figures, and then you've got a different breaker then in Series 3. Again, from a comics perspective, you just accept that these they're retconned in so well in the stories that you just accept it. And when you buy into the mythology in the comics, it automatically translates over then into the toys. So you're not like there was a Stalker in SAS Force. It's a completely different Stalker in Series 3.
Mm-hmm.
but nobody ever said, hang on a sec, these guys have the same code name. You just go with the flow and go with the fun, you know.
I think also the fact that I missed out on Series 3. For one thing, I don't think Series 3 was produced in all that great in numbers, because they're very difficult to find even now on Palatoy cards. The Palatoy versions of those characters are very tough to find. You'll pay a lot of money for them, whereas you won't for Series 2 Z-Force figure or whatever. And I think I also kind of skipped it, because what happened is my brother owned, was 9 years older than me. So he had all of the Palatoy Action Force stuff from Series 1 and Series 2. And then when I got into G.I. Joe, it had transitioned to the Hasbro Marvel Action Force figures. So there was a gap there between me and my brother where the 1985 toys didn't come into it because he had stopped buying them. And then I started a few years later, and I came in when we already had Flint and Lady J and Roblox version 2 and so on. So I kind of missed that year window where you got uses of code names and so on with those figures.
It is a blink and you miss kind of business.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like that With It UK fans might have looked at the Scarlet figure and gone, oh, that's just a cheap knockoff, right? Oh, they just
who's this Belgian Quarrel?
Right? Who's low rent
Quarrels from Switzerland?
Who's low rent Quarrel? I mean, come on.
Let's we're running long, so let's roll right into shout outs. Mark, we're gonna let our guests go first.
Yeah.
Brian, who are we shouting out to this week?
Well, look, got to give a big shout out to Dave Tree. I mean, I've mentioned him a couple of times on the show already. Dave is that kind of. Dave has done so much work for preserving the legacy of Action Force that he really deserves a lot more credit than he probably gets. A lot of the Action Force content that you see out there online in terms of old photos, even the TV commercial, Dave made all that happen. That didn't exist in a digital format till he unearthed it and brought it out there for the rest of us to enjoy. So big shout out to Dave. Got to give a massive shout out to my buddy Chris and all the guys over in the Full Force as well. Plug the Full Force here on the live stream. They're the big supporters of the work that myself and Paddy have done, not just on this project, but on all of our projects. Want to give a shout out to the guys over at Dublin City Comics and Collectibles. That's where I get my comics nowadays, and my toys as well. And I want to give a shout out to Larry's newsagents on Ballymun Avenue in Dublin, where I bought all my Battle Action Force comics when I was a kid.
There you go. Going old school.
I will repeat the shout out to Dave Tree, mainly because he's shipping me my Cobra Vipers this weekend.
All right.
My custom Cobra Vipers.
There we go.
So hooray! Because I'm actually really looking forward. I've always loved the Viper design. I'm not going too deep on classified. I've only bought a couple of figures, but I saw the Viper and I'm like, yep, always loved the Viper design.
You gotta go there.
Yeah, so I had to get one of them. I'd also like to say thank you and hello to the guys in Dublin City Comics for getting me my comics every week, and Chris McLeod and all the folks at Boss Fight, Eric Aranya, for helping us out with and Katrina as well for helping us out with the prints for the campaign. Anybody who's backed the campaign, thank you very, very much so far. Anybody who's thinking of backing the campaign, thank you very, very much so far. Yes. Let's get the magic 220 backers numbers so we can all get this book. And thanks to the former Palatoy staff who've, answered all of our dumb questions about a toy line they worked on 40 years ago and barely remember. We've got some really great insights for the book, like crazy stuff that I don't think anybody's ever heard before. Like, do you know there's an abandoned coal mine outside of Leicester that has hundreds of thousands of Star Wars and Action Force toys?
Don't tell anybody where that is. That's their secret. We're going there.
And nobody knows where it is now. There literally is a mine shaft full of old vintage Star Wars toys under that town.
If the book is funded and printed, we will mark that location on a map, right? Hidden.
And we'll all go digging for robo skulls.
Awesome. I mean, I'm vaccinated, so I'll be there, man. I'll have a shovel.
Hey.
Well, we just have to find it. There was actually a report about it this week because they're worried that they're building houses in the area now and they don't know where these old mine shafts are. But the rumor is they're full of old Action Man and Action Force and Star Wars product. And one of the Palatoy designers confirmed that to us, that there is an abandoned mine shaft, but nobody remembers where it is.
Well,
Just full of stuff.
Palatoy made a lot more stuff than just Action Force or Action Man or Star Wars. There's a load of other toys there that nobody wants to collect, and maybe that's what's in the mine shafts.
No, I've been told Action Force product is in them.
We can leave the rest of it down there. Mark, start looking into plane ride ticket prices now.
Road trip.
You'll earn it back in Robo Skulls.
Yeah, we'll have to figure something out because I can't swim. So,
Mark Weber, who are you shouting out?
It kind of occurred to me as we were talking along from a LinkedIn notice I got today. 15-year anniversary for Michael Kelly at Hasbro. And he's one of my very favorite people. He's VP of their publishing department, and just an all-around great guy who, confirmed or not, I'm sure had some fingerprints on the approval process.
It may or may not have been an email to Michael Kelly.
May or may not have been to Michael Kelly. So one of my very favorite people at Hasbro, head of the publishing department, and it's his 15-year anniversary there today. So to Michael Kelly and all the good work his publishing department does, congratulations, and here's to 15 more.
That all you got, Mark? You just give
That's
it
it.
the discount one.
I like not the discount, the spotlight.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a shout out to our the fourth man on the What's on Joe Mine team, Racktime Rob, who is passed out on the couch already. Shout out there. Shout out to Joe Colton, who couldn't be with us today. On assignment. Filming a movie or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll talk to her next week. Give a shout out to our fine sponsors at Kokomo Toys. Sing with me the Kokomo Toys theme song. Kokomo Toys.
Kokomo Toys.
We'll get there someday.
The rosary.
We really need the lyrics on screen with a little bouncing ball so you can.
We need people to donate to our coffee down there so we can up our StreamYard membership. But a big thanks to everybody who joined us this afternoon. Once again, our viewership got up into the high teens, which makes me wonder if maybe our job situations aren't so great. But thank you for joining us all the same. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in on this one later, which will be most of our viewership. But hey, no problems there. Make sure that you catch the link to the Kickstarter down below. That is what you need to be checking out for yourself and pledging. That is what you need to be sharing in all your collector circles and getting them to pledge too. We need to make this one happen. We need to give this is the Kickstarter this is the sort of project that needs the What's on Joe Mine push. We don't back a whole lot of things that don't get to the finish line. We're counting on you guys to help us get there.
If people are kind of maybe on the fence a little bit on this one, take the chance, because we promise you this is going to be something really, really special, not just in terms of kind of the whole visual aesthetic, but also that the story that's being told is, it's a great story, and it's really, really detailed and beautifully told. So, take a chance. Please give us your support. Help us make this happen, and you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, these are not guys who are just throwing something together at the last minute. This is an established team that has done similar work on other properties in the past. You can count on this book happening. This is not some vapor project that is going to disappear as soon as you pledge. These guys actually make books. We can prove it.
If we wanted to rip off people, I think we would have picked a more successful IP than Action Force.
Something like that.
Somebody would have got us a couple of thousand backers and hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of 27,000 we're looking for this.
Right.
I think Mike makes a great point here. This is not their first rodeo, right? And if it wasn't taken, these guys would be noted authors, Brian Hickey and Paddy, right? Yeah.
I think so. I think past noted. Yeah. Perhaps, maybe.
I'm just saying, one of those is trademarked, I'm pretty sure, but fine.
We can't go throwing that title around. That's special, and he's going to come after us.
Right? It's like limited edition.
Yeah, we start calling other people noted author,
Yeah.
and James Kavanaugh just going to show up off camera and just start. You'll see the haymaker land.
Open his blades and start strangling me.
Yeah, if you look in a mirror and say noted author 3 times, James Kavanaugh appears.
Just appears in a poof of purple smoke, wearing a poncho and a sombrero.
That's it. So be careful.
The last time we saw James was the last time I saw him on this side of the pond, he was the scariest looking Skeletron I've ever seen in my life.
We'll try and find pictures of that one. But
just go on to Facebook and search for Rollout Roll Call 2014, and it's there. Believe me.
It is. I got to do that recently. I have pictures of him dressed up as Crimson Crystal Ball, but that's for another day. But for my guests, Brian, Hickey, Paddy, Lennon, thank you so much for joining us this evening, afternoon, whatever what is it where you guys are? Tuesday morning? What is it?
It's a late Friday night.
Okay, Friday afternoon here. I'm thinking it's like Sunday 3 a.m. I don't know. Whatever. But for again, Brian, Hickey, Paddy, Lennon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
For my co-host Mark the Honcho Weber, I'm Mike Arizari. Be sure to join us next Friday for another edition of What's on Joe Mind. Do the right thing. Get yourself vaccinated. Keep everybody else healthy, safe, and together, and we'll all be back to normal before you know it, or as normal as we get around these parts. But have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Full force, whatever you want to say.
Bye, guys.
Full force.